the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office is fully engaged in our community. We'll learn more about the great work of the Community Outreach Unit and its director, Siobhan Davis. It's all here on the next Latino Motion. Join us.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on Facebook and YouTube. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics. Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare. For more information, call 1-888-569-1000 or visit atlanticare.org. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.
Welcome to Latino Motion, a weekly interview show highlighting issues impacting New Jersey's Latino community while advancing understanding of Latino cultural heritage and contributions to our society. And here is your host, Bert Lopez.
Buenos dias and welcome to Latino Motion. I'm happy to have a representative from the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office to discuss the work of the Community Outreach Unit. Joining me is Siobhan Davis. She is a Director of Community Outreach for the Prosecutor's Office. Siobhan, welcome to Latino Motion.
Thank you so much for having me, Bert.
Well, it's a pleasure having you here, and I know that you've been with the Prosecutor's Office a little while. Happy to have you. We've had Roy Roster here in the past, and you're kind of taking some of the work that he was doing previously. Absolutely. And obviously Will Reynolds has been on the show before. And you're doing the public outreach, which they all did, and it's a very important work. Tell me why it's important for the prosecutor's office to have a public outreach unit.
Absolutely. So the community outreach unit at our prosecutor's office is really, really new. So we just initiated a community outreach unit back in June 2022, and Prosecutor Reynolds actually did that because it felt like there was a disconnect between the community and law enforcement. A lot of people don't know what the prosecutor's office does, and there was a lot of fear and a lack of trust between the prosecutor's office and the community. So we wanted to, number one, highlight some of the things that we're doing to show that we actually are trying to help the community, and then actually follow through by fostering some of those sincere relationships with a lot of the groups in the community, the groups, the members, so that we can serve them the best way that we can.
Speaking of groups, I know the Prosecutor Reynolds is an integral part of the Clean and Safe committee that Councilman Shabazz leads over in Atlantic City. Very engaged in everything Atlantic City, and really even doing the walks on the boardwalk. It's something new in terms of having the prosecutor out in front in the community. Why is that so important?
I really admire the work that Prosecutor Reynolds does because he doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. And literally walks the walk. He is under the boardwalk for every single one of our homeless outreaches at 6 a.m. Every single one. And usually I think if people are trying to be performative, they might do that right in the beginning of their role, and then it kind of just might start to filter off. And he has kept that in the forefront. It's clearly one of his largest priorities is to actually be doing the work and being the change that he wants to see in the community.
You mentioned community partners going out and to different groups. Tell me a little bit about some of the groups that the prosecutor's office is engaged with.
Sure. So for our homeless outreach, we're really happy to be partnered with Jewish Family Services. They lead that outreach and they lead those walks because they're the ones actually giving the social services and the help to the individuals in need. Same with Volunteers of America. And we also work really closely with Jewish Family Services as well as AVANZAR, which is our county's domestic violence shelter and resource center for all domestic violence victims, and they also serve victims of human trafficking as well.
And I'm assuming that, you know, although the prosecutor is engaged in prosecuting criminals, that this is a layer of prevention, right? Trying to keep people from being in the judicial system is very important, and certainly that seems to be paying off in terms of dividends for the prosecutor's office. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. A big part of it, yes, we're a law enforcement agency. The word prosecution is in it because we have to prosecute crimes. But that's absolutely right. A lot of our community outreach is an attempt to be proactive, especially with our work with the youth. We work really closely with the Atlantic City Boys and Girls Club and a lot of the schools to work on decision making, on how to make those decisions, internet safety. We have a mentorship program as well because we want the youth to know early how those decisions will affect them and the consequences, not just criminally, but professionally and in their lives, daily lives.
So tell me how the rest of the office, right, the prosecutor's office, large office, how's the rest of the office engaged in outreaches as well? You mentioned some of the mentoring programs, et cetera.
Absolutely. So a lot of our detectives, they are incredibly busy, our detectives and our assistant prosecutors, but when they find time, a lot of them love to volunteer their time going into the schools to actually talk about what a detective does, the difference between being a detective versus being a police officer at one of the police departments, municipalities, and just talking about what their experience is in law enforcement, how they got there. And we have a lot of detectives that are from Atlantic City and Pleasantville that go into these schools. They can show you exactly where they sat when they went there, and they can tell these kids, listen, I was in your place, I was in your seat, and these are the decisions that I made, and you can do it too.
And you're working for the prosecutor's office. You're not a law enforcement officer.
Right.
You're not an attorney, but you have an interesting background. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you ended up in the prosecutor's office.
Yes. I graduated from Rutgers University with a bachelor's in psychology, but then I had a minor in criminology as well, because I've always been interested in the way that people think, the way that the brain works, but especially in the context of criminal justice. So I went on to get my master's degree in forensic psychology. I was living in New York at the time. There is a great CUNY school called John Jay, College of Criminal Justice, and the entire school is devoted to criminology and criminal justice studies. And when I got out of that, I moved back down here and wanted to apply what I had learned to, number one, help people with the knowledge of psychology, but within the context of the judiciary system.
Yeah, I'd like to get back into that psychology in terms of how that's helping you in your career. But you mentioned you came back because you're local, right?
Yes, Vineland. Tell
me about, you went to school here as well?
Yes, yep, Vineland, born and raised, elementary, middle, and Vineland High School. It's a very rural town. It's not too different from here, but the entire time I would say I was at Rutgers, I was working in Atlantic City, so definitely no stranger to Atlantic City. Every summer I was at the Borgata working as a spa concierge in their gorgeous spa. So Atlantic City was definitely kind of one of my second homes.
And psychology.
Yes.
Forensic psychology, and I might not be pronouncing that correctly.
Oh, you are.
But how does that apply in the work you do?
When I actually started at the prosecutor's office, I want to say about 4.5 years ago now, okay. I was hired as a victim witness advocate. Oh, okay. So I got to advocate for crime victims. I was kind of that first person that spoke to them about the crime and the resources that they could get. So that's really where I felt like I could apply, learn about the criminal justice system, because I had to be the one to explain it to victims, but also also kind of work as an unofficial crisis intervention specialist.
Sure. And I know you mentioned the fact that you're touching victims of crime. So it's not just the prosecution piece of it, but you're also working that. And we want to get into your witness advocacy approach. But how important is it that you also are working with victims of crimes?
It is integral to everything that we're doing. Obviously, a large part of the office is focused on investigation and is focused on prosecution. But a lot of times the victims of the crime, the people who are directly affected, they kind of get lost and left by the wayside.
Absolutely. I want to continue that discussion because this is very important. We want to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on Facebook and YouTube. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with Siobhan Davis. She is the Director of Community Outreach at the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office. And Siobhan, we left off talking about victim witness and your commitment. You started working in that area when you joined the prosecutor's office is very important. And I know, particularly within the minority community, and take the Latino community, for example, where witnesses are just shy to come forward. They're scared to come forward. And basically, a lot of it is sort of warranted because there hasn't been a level of trust built within the judicial system or the justice system. Tell me a little bit more about that work and that unit, that department.
Absolutely. So the victim witness unit is really the backbone of the prosecutor's office, because without our victims participating in the cases and the investigation, there's really no case to pursue. But there's difficulty, just like you said, if nobody actually wants to come forward. And a lot of the challenges arise in minority communities. And in terms of the Latino community, we have two fantastic bilingual advocates, Maria del Sosa and Aristelcy Bermudez, who are there not just to speak the same language, but provide that kind of safety and that kind of support that really only two people from the same cultural background can do.
Yeah, very, very important, obviously, to reach them. There's certainly a lot of resistance for victims to come forward. And again, I say rightly so, because that just hasn't been the trust built there. And a lot of it could be barriers because of language, and some of it could be immigration status. Tell me about the role that immigration status may play in terms of victim witness and the services you provide to them.
A lot of people, I feel like they don't want to come forward because they don't want to be asked about their immigration status, and they don't want to deal with the repercussions of anything that comes from that. They have visions of people tearing families apart. ICE has been not very kind to immigrants in the past few years. So I am really glad that in 2018, one of our former attorney generals, Graywall, he actually came up with this immigration trust initiative. So now, no police officers, no one can actually legally ask you whether or not you are an immigrant. That status has absolutely nothing to do and is irrelevant, because we are here to provide help no matter what your immigration status is. If you're here, then you're deserving of help and support.
So just so we're clear, as a witness, as a victim, you have no repercussions if you go and pursue filing charges and ultimately being a witness for the prosecutor. There's no repercussions with immigration if you step forward and do so.
That is absolutely 100% true.
Now, tell me a little bit about how you're helping to build that trust, right? Because it's easier said than done. So we're here telling everyone, hey, you don't have to worry about it. The reality is that there's a lot of fear. So what are you doing to try to bridge that gap?
So we're hoping actually to partner with a lot more Hispanic and Latino organizations so that our assistant prosecutors who are in this work and do this work and our bilingual victim advocates can actually go out and talk about the Immigration Trust Initiative and educate and promote for the public. Because, yeah, there is that trust, that lack of trust within it. But if they can actually promote it and educate the community, then they can understand if something actually happens, I can come forward and it doesn't matter about my status and I don't have to worry about, you know, my family being torn apart or me being taken away. And we actually have a fantastic program, again, coming from the Office of the Attorney General in collaboration with the Department of Homeland Security. And it's called a U visa. So for certain crimes, and this is by a case-by-case basis, if you are a victim of a crime and you are able to cooperate, you don't have an immigration status in the U.S., you're able to cooperate through the entire case. They may provide you with immigration relief, and you may become, you know, an immigrant by the end of it.
So it's called U visa.
Yes.
And you could only get that through the prosecutor's office, correct? So it's the Atlantic County prosecutor's office that would be, and in this case, your office, that would be able to basically award a U visa or at least get the process started, correct?
Yes, yep. County prosecutors' offices across all 21 counties, they have people within the building that can actually approve those U visas, and those are the right entities.
And that's very important, certainly, to do that and get that process started. They would contact the prosecutor's office to learn more about it. Let me talk about restitution for a minute, because I know witnesses often that have been victimized, you know, don't know where to turn. Is there a process or is there guidance you provide with victims that are entitled to restitution?
Absolutely. One of the chief priorities of our conversations, our being victim witness advocates and the victims that they serve, is to talk about restitution, but also connect to any sort of resources that can be paid for when you are a victim of a crime. So the Office of the Attorney General does have a branch which we refer to as VCCO, and it stands for Victims of Crime Compensation Office. So if you're a victim of a certain crime, usually something more violent, and you have to go to the hospital, people have broken their ribs, broken their legs, we have gunshot victims, and there are a lot of people who don't have health and medical insurance. Right. Once you connect with our victim witness advocates, they will educate you about this program and walk you step by step through this application so you can apply and everything will be taken care of.
Yeah, that's certainly very important. A lot of people don't know this, right?
Right.
And the restitution, or the fact that you could get help because you've been a victim. And how do they connect with that help?
They would have to contact the prosecutor's office, and a victim witness advocate would be available to help. And what's so important about this is because restitution, which is something that's ordered by the judge and ordered by the court, it's so tricky because it depends on the defendant actually paying it. And if the defendant is released from detainment and doesn't have a job and doesn't have anything, then that victim is not going to get that money. And so it's going to be really difficult with the restitution process, which is why it's so important to connect with your victim advocate so you can find other avenues and other ways and resources to be helped.
Yeah, that's certainly very important, and you know, wish that more of the community was aware of this. I'm glad that you mentioned that you do have two bilingual.
Yes.
Give us the names again.
Aristelcy Bermudez and Maria del Sosa. And Maria Del Sosa has been a part of the victim witness advocacy for at the prosecutor's office for over 15 years now. Yeah, so she started it.
We want to continue. We have a little more to talk about. We'll be right back. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with Siobhan Davis, Director of Community Outreach at the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office. And Siobhan, we were talking about victim witness and the various programs you have. Obviously, very little known, or not as well known, I should say, but not all of the victims necessarily report a crime, right? And there may be other resources, particularly I'm thinking about domestic violence. Tell me more about what other avenues there are to help support those victims.
Absolutely. There are many reasons that victims don't want to come forward. Sometimes it could be very troublesome for them within their lives, within the actual perpetrators, the way that they're treated by them, or just being involved with the court system. It can be very time-consuming and incredibly frustrating. So for those victims of domestic violence who often are victims again and again and again and end up with a lot of different open cases, there are other avenues and other ways to get resources. And our local domestic violence shelter in the county is AVANZAR. We work incredibly closely with them. And we have a great relationship with them. So they provide, not only do they provide completely free shelter, they have a 24/7 hotline which you can call and also text, which is sometimes the safer option for domestic violence victims. They also provide free counseling, free legal advice, sometimes free child care. They have so many resources for domestic violence victims. And for our domestic violence victims, that's what the victim witness advocates connect them with.
And that's very, very important to be aware of those resources. Now, for the domestic violence, obviously, when you mentioned they may not want to come forward, file charges, and sometimes you need to make sure that they're out of danger or they feel comfortable so that they could proceed other channels to file their complaint and really file the case against their perpetrators that are harming them. Let's talk about mental health, because that's a big issue, right? It's certainly a big issue everywhere we go. A lot of the homeless may have mental health issues, and I know you're a mental health advocate. Tell me more about what the county's doing as far as mental health.
So I think that mental health, it's kind of becoming like a buzzword or buzz phrase, but it's actually really good because all of us have mental health, whether it's good or whether it's poor. So it's just a part of our health, just like our physical health. So it's really important that now law enforcement and the judiciary is getting involved. Particularly our county has started a diversionary program, which we're calling Mental Health Court. And it is for those perpetrators and defendants who are suffering from a mental illness, which can be obviously a very large contributor to their criminality and to their criminal behavior. So instead of putting those individuals in detainment, in jail, in prison for long amounts of time for whatever their crimes might be, with exclusions, of course, they are going to get the help that they need. And so long as they commit and they're cooperative within that, they're gonna be able to kind of evade or at least have some of the charges lessened.
And sometimes you need to force an individual who has mental health to seek treatment, and perhaps if they've been involved in a crime, that this is the only way they're going to get the services they need.
Absolutely. There are a lot of people, when they're so deep within their mental illness, they're not going to want the help. So sometimes it is difficult to connect them in that right, but when you have something as attractive as maybe you can have your charges disappear, or maybe you can have your charges lessened, I think then the help actually becomes more beneficial and more attractive to them.
Let's talk about the youth again, and I know that mental health goes across, all ages, obviously. And I know when you're in terms of your outreach, you also engage with mental health as far as conveying the importance of good mental health with the youth.
Yes. So we work really closely with the Atlantic City Boys and Girls Club. And as a mental health advocate myself, I have gone and done mental health presentations with the youth because I believe, again, it's just as important as physical health, but a lot of times it's not talked about. And particularly, I talk from my own standpoint, which is, from the Black community, but also in a lot of minority communities, there's a huge stigma, and mental health is just not something that's discussed or acknowledged. And it's kind of like you need to have a tough exterior and just get over it and keep going. So I like to teach people when they're young and they can actually still absorb things. It's okay to not be okay. That you can share your issues and your challenges with other people, and that there are resources and outlets to help. And we also try to also emphasize coping mechanisms, because there are a lot of youth who don't understand those negative feelings that are going on. And instead of lashing out and maybe participating in some behavior that might be kind of criminal or just negative in general, we want to teach what good coping mechanisms look like. So talking about mindfulness, talking about, go for a run, go for a walk, listen to music, call a friend, and don't just react as soon as you feel a negative feeling.
Absolutely, and certainly that's so critical and so important, particularly for the youth, because youth, when we were younger, maybe a fist fight,
yes.
But today is using weapons, and out of frustration or anger, and channeling that is very, very critical and important, and obviously not to minimize the great work the prosecutor's office does in terms of locking up violent criminals. It's very, very important. But all this work in terms of the community outreach is so very important. Tell me, in terms of your first, how many years now at the prosecutor's office?
4.5.
Four and a half years. How important you think is to expand upon the great work you're already doing?
That is such a great question, because our community outreach is so new. We want to make sure that everything that we're doing, from our relationships to our events, it's going to be sustainable. So it's not just under Prosecutor Reynolds. We want to have a foundation so that it can continue to grow and expand throughout the next administrations.
And I know that Roy Roster started where you are in
yes.
terms of doing the community outreach. It's now part of the state, right?
Yes.
Because he is under the Attorney General, doing a very important role as well. Tell me about that.
Yes. So he actually started at the prosecutor's office as the director of the victim witness unit. And then he was I would say the OG in starting the community outreach unit. Most of the events, the ideas, he's incredibly creative, and relationships that he brings in are his. Mm-hmm.
So it's so great that it started here mm-hmm. and it's taken that to the state level. So very important.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. It's been great having you here as a guest, Siobhan. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us at home once again here on Latino Motion.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare. For more information, call 1-888-569-1000 or visit atlanticare.org. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.